I never considered my life anything out of the ordinary. My name is Jack, a 21-year-old college student in a small, unremarkable town, where everyone knows everyone. My days were a predictable blend of lectures, study sessions, and the occasional night out with friends. But that was before everything changed, before people started seeing me in places I'd never been. It started subtly. A classmate mentioned she saw me at the grocery store on a day I spent entirely on campus. I laughed it off, assuming it was a case of mistaken identity. Then it happened again. A professor commented on my odd behavior in the library, a place I hadn't visited in months. Mild confusion turned into unsettling curiosity. Was there someone in town who looked just like me? I have always stood out in my group of friends, not just for my distinctive mop of curly hair and a penchant for vintage jackets, but for my outgoing nature. My best friends, Jamie and Tyler, often joked that I could make friends with a shadow. But shadows don't walk around town, mimicking your every feature. The small college town, nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, had always felt like a cocoon, safe and familiar. But as more sightings of my lookalike came to light, that sense of safety started to fray at the edges. Each mention of my doppelganger added another stitch to a tapestry of unease that now hung over my daily life. Jamie and Tyler noticed a change in me. I was no longer the carefree friend they knew. My laughter came less frequently, and my eyes constantly darted around, half expecting to catch a glimpse of this mysterious double. I remember the evening Jamie confronted me, their face etched with concern and confusion. "Jack, why did you ignore me at the cafe today?" Jamie asked, hurt evident in their voice. "I wasn't at the cafe today, Jamie. I spent the whole day in the chemistry lab," I replied, a chill running down my spine. The disbelief in Jamie's eyes said it all. They were certain it was me. And why wouldn't they be? Who else in this small town looked exactly like me? That night, I lay in bed, the shadows in my room morphing into sinister shapes. The boundaries of my identity felt blurred, as if someone else was slowly erasing the lines that defined who I was. The idea of someone walking around, wearing my face, doing things I would never do, it was like living in a nightmare. But unlike a nightmare, I couldn't wake up from this. The first chapter of my story might seem mundane, a simple case of mistaken identity. But believe me, it was only the beginning of a descent into a reality far more terrifying than I could ever imagine. The next day, the weight of the situation started to truly sink in. Jamie's words echoed in my mind, a relentless reminder that something deeply unsettling was happening. I could no longer dismiss it as mere coincidences. It was time to confront this bizarre mystery head-on. I began my own investigation, starting with talking to those who claimed to have seen me. Each account was eerily similar. They described me, or rather, someone who looked exactly like me, down to the smallest detail. This other Jack was seen in various parts of town. Sipping coffee at the local cafe, browsing books at the bookstore, even jogging in the park. Places I frequented, but not at the times mentioned. The peculiar thing was, according to these accounts, my doppelganger never interacted much. He was always seen alone, his actions mundane yet strangely detached. It was as if he was mimicking a normal life, but lacked the essence that made it genuinely mine. With each story, a sense of dread grew inside me. It was one thing to hear about a lookalike, but the consistency of these sightings painted a much darker picture. Someone, or something, was impersonating me with chilling accuracy. Jamie and Tyler became my pillars during this time, their skepticism slowly turning into concern. We spent nights poring over the internet, diving into forums and old books, searching for anything that might explain what was happening. That's when we stumbled upon the old folklore of doppelgangers, ghostly doubles of living people, often considered omens of bad luck or even death. The more we read, the more the pieces seemed to fit, yet it all felt like grasping at straws. How could ancient myths explain what was happening to me? I wanted logical answers, but logic seemed to have left my life the moment my double stepped into it. Amidst the search for answers, strange occurrences began to happen. I'd find items in my apartment misplaced, though I lived alone. I'd wake up with a jolt, feeling as if someone had just left the room. My memories began to blur, moments I was sure I had experienced started to feel like they belonged to someone else. It was as though my sense of self was being eroded, piece by piece, by this unseen twin. Fear took a firm grip on my life. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping at shadows that resembled my form. The mirror became my enemy, each reflection a question: was it me, or was it him? This chapter of my story might sound like a delusion, a mind playing tricks on itself. But it was real as the growing fear that I was losing myself to an entity I didn't understand. The unknown nature of my doppelganger was a puzzle I was desperate to solve, not realizing that the next piece to be placed would lead me to a confrontation I was entirely unprepared for. The sightings of my doppelganger escalated, each one more personal and invasive than the last. It was no longer just public spaces. He was seen outside my childhood home, a place filled with memories and moments that were exclusively mine. The most chilling incident was when someone claimed to have seen him at my grandmother's grave. That sacred space, a private haven of grief and remembrance, had been violated. The boundaries between him and me were blurring, and with it, my grip on reality. Jamie, Tyler, and I dove deeper into the lore surrounding doppelgangers. We scoured local history for similar occurrences, hoping to find something, anything, that could explain the phenomena. The folklore we unearthed spoke of doppelgangers as harbingers of misfortune, but these were just stories, right? Yet, the more we read, the more I couldn't shake off the feeling that these tales were more than mere superstitions. As the days passed, the occurrences around me grew stranger. My belongings would be found in places I hadn't left them. I'd hear whispers in my apartment late at night, echoes of conversations I never had. Sleep became elusive, filled with nightmares of being chased by an unseen figure, always just a step behind me. But it wasn't just the physical occurrences that tormented me. It was the psychological toll, the constant questioning of my sanity. Every time I looked in the mirror, I wondered if the reflection staring back was truly me. The man in the mirror mimicked my movements, but his eyes seemed hollow, as if lacking the spark that made me, me. It was during this time that my relationships began to strain. People in town looked at me with suspicion and fear. They whispered behind my back, unsure if I was the real Jack or the other one. Friends I had known for years crossed the street to avoid me. I was becoming a pariah in my own town, a ghost of the person I once was. Jamie and Tyler stood by me, but the strain was evident. Our conversations were filled with unspoken questions and fears. The easy camaraderie we once shared was replaced by a tense alliance, united against a threat we didn't fully understand. As the days turned into weeks, my life became a waking nightmare. I was living in a constant state of heightened alertness, jumping as shadows, my heart racing at the slightest sound. The fear of encountering my double consumed me. I avoided my usual haunts, became reclusive, and watched the world with wary, tired eyes. Then came the day that changed everything. A chance to confront my fears, to face the entity that had turned my life into a living hell. A local librarian, who knew me well, called to say she'd seen my doppelganger in the library just an hour ago. The library, a place of solace and learning, where I had spent countless hours lost in books. It felt like a deliberate taunt, a challenge. I remember standing outside the library, my heart pounding in my chest. The sun was setting, casting long shadows on the ground, shadows that seemed to mock my resolve. With every step I took towards the entrance, my anxiety grew. What would I say? What would I do? But I had to know. I had to face him. The confrontation I was about to have, in the quiet dusty aisles of the library, would be the climax of this surreal ordeal. It was a moment I thought I wanted, but as I pushed open the library door, I realized I was terrified of the truth I might find. The library was quiet, the kind of silence that amplifies every small sound, the rustle of pages, the distant footsteps, the beating of my own heart. It was a familiar place, filled with the comforting smell of old books, and the faint hint of coffee from the cafe next door. But that day, it felt alien, as if I had stepped into a world slightly askew from my own. I moved through the aisles, my eyes scanning for a face identical to mine. The librarians gave me curious looks but said nothing. They knew me well enough, but the air around us was thick with unspoken questions. Was I the real Jack, or was I the other one? Then, I saw him. He was there, in the history section, casually browsing through books as if he belonged in my life, in my world. My breath caught in my throat. He was me, in every conceivable way. The same curly hair, the same height, the same way of tilting his head when he read something interesting. Our eyes met, and for a moment, time stood still. I saw recognition in his eyes, a mirror of my own shock, but there was something else, something cold and emotionless. It was like looking into a void where my soul should have been. Why are you doing this? I managed to choke out, my voice a mix of anger, fear, and confusion. He placed the book down and turned fully towards me. His movements were eerily similar to mine, but there was a precision to them that was unnatural. When he spoke, it was with my voice, but devoid of any warmth. You wouldn't understand, Jack. Not yet, he said, his words sending a chill down my spine. Understand what? Why are you here, impersonating me? He smiled, a perfect replica of my own, but it didn't reach his eyes. I am here because you are here. We are bound, you and I, in ways you can't yet comprehend. But why? What do you want from me? My voice trembled, a mix of fear and frustration. His eyes held mine, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of something, pity, maybe, or amusement. You'll see in time. Just remember, Jack, not everything is as it seems. Not even yourself. Before I could respond, he turned and walked away, disappearing between the aisles. I stood there, frozen, trying to process what had just happened. The confrontation left me with more questions than answers. Who or what was he? What did he mean by his cryptic words? I left the library in a daze, the encounter replaying over and over in my mind. It felt surreal, like a scene from a movie, yet it was undeniably real. The doppelganger's words haunted me, echoing in the depths of my mind. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts and fears. The reality I had known was crumbling, replaced by a world where my own reflection was a stranger. The line between Jack and the other Jack was blurring, and I feared losing myself to this shadowy double. The confrontation at the library was supposed to bring clarity, but it only deepened the mystery. I was left with a sense of unease, a fear of what was to come. Little did I know, the events that followed would only spiral further into darkness, challenging the very essence of who I thought I was. In the days following the confrontation, a heavy silence settled over my life. The sightings of my double ceased abruptly, as if our encounter in the library had been a final act in a twisted play. But the absence of the doppelganger didn't bring relief. Instead, it left a void, a lingering sense of unease that clung to me like a second skin. The town's attitude towards me had shifted palpably. People I once considered friends now regarded me with a mix of curiosity and wariness. Their eyes would flicker with doubt upon seeing me, as if questioning which Jack stood before them. The whispers that followed me were a constant reminder of the doppelganger's impact. I felt like a ghost, haunting the fringes of a life I once lived freely. Even my relationship with Jamie and Tyler changed. They tried to hide their apprehension, but it was there, lurking beneath the surface of every conversation. We were still friends, but the trust and ease that had defined our friendship were tainted with the shadow of uncertainty. They wanted to believe I was still me, but doubt is a persistent weed, difficult to eradicate once planted. My own psyche began to unravel. Paranoia crept into my every thought. I avoided mirrors, no longer able to bear the sight of my own reflection, fearing I might see him instead. Sleep was elusive, filled with nightmares where I chased my double through endless corridors, never quite catching up. My waking hours were no better, a constant vigil against a threat that had vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared. I began to question my own identity. Who was I, if someone could replicate my existence so effortlessly? The lines between reality and illusion blurred, leaving me adrift in a sea of existential dread. The doppelganger had not just impersonated my appearance, he had stolen a piece of my essence, leaving a hollow where my confidence once resided. The incident at the library had been the climax of this ordeal, but the aftermath was a slow descent into a personal hell. The fear of encountering my double had been replaced by a deeper, more insidious fear of losing myself, of becoming nothing more than a shadow of who I once was. Days turned into weeks, and the eerie calm persisted. The doppelganger remained a specter of the past, but his legacy lingered. The town slowly returned to its routine, but I remained trapped in a limbo of my own making. The resolution to this nightmare seemed as elusive as the doppelganger himself. I longed for closure, for a return to normalcy, but some wounds run too deep to heal. The final chapter of my story was approaching, a chapter one hoped would bring answers, but feared would only bring more questions. I didn't know it then, but the end of this ordeal was far from over. The true test of my identity, of my sanity, was yet to come. As I navigated the treacherous waters of my fractured reality, I clung to the hope that I would emerge whole on the other side. But hope is a fragile thing, easily shattered by the harsh truths of a world that no longer made sense. The resolution to my ordeal began unexpectedly, with a text from Jamie late one evening. Need to see you. Urgent. Come to the cafe. The message was brief, but the urgency in it was palpable. It had been weeks since the last sighting of my doppelganger, and a part of me had begun to hope that the nightmare was finally over. This message, however, reignited the embers of fear that I had been desperately trying to extinguish. I hurried to the cafe, the streets eerily quiet under the cloak of night. My footsteps echoed off the buildings, a lonely sound in the stillness. The cafe was closed, but a faint light glowed inside. Jamie must have stayed late, I thought. I quickened my pace, eager to find out why Jamie needed to see me so urgently. As I approached the cafe, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Jamie, this time more frantic. Where are you? Please hurry. Confusion swirled within me. If Jamie was inside the cafe, why were they texting as if I were late? I reached the cafe and pushed the door open, the bell tinkling softly. The cafe was empty except for Jamie, who sat at our usual table, their face pale and eyes wide with fear. Jack, thank God you're here, Jamie said, their voice trembling. I saw him again, your double. He was just outside, watching the cafe. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Where is he now? I asked, scanning the cafe for any sign of my doppelganger. I don't know. He disappeared when I texted you. But Jack, he looked different. More menacing, somehow. The fear that had become my constant companion tightened its grip on me. I felt trapped, caught in a sinister game with rules I didn't understand. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. Why had my double returned? What did he want? We decided to leave the cafe together, seeking safety in numbers. As we stepped outside, the street was desolate, bathed in the cold light of the street lamps. We walked in silence, each lost in our thoughts, the weight of the situation bearing down on us. That's when it happened. My phone buzzed with another message, this time from Tyler. Jack, where are you? Jamie's here, and they're freaking out. Said they saw your double at the cafe. My blood turned to ice. If Jamie was with Tyler, then who was the person I had just left the cafe with? I turned to look at the person beside me, but they were gone, vanished into the night as if they had never been there. Panic surged through me, a tidal wave of fear and disbelief. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The doppelganger had tricked me, luring me out under the guise of Jamie. I ran back to the cafe, but it was empty, the door swinging gently in the night breeze. The eerie quiet of the street mocked me, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. The story ends here, but the resolution is far from complete. The doppelganger is still out there, a shadowy figure that haunts my every step. I live in a world of constant vigilance, never knowing if the person I'm talking to is real or just another trick of my double. The fear remains, a constant companion in my life. I know now that the doppelganger is a part of me, a manifestation of something I may never fully understand. The town has moved on, but I remain trapped in this nightmare, forever looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next encounter with the other me. And so, my story ends, not with answers, but with questions. Questions about identity, reality, and the very nature of existence. The doppelganger is still out there, a reminder that some mysteries are never truly solved, and some shadows never fully disappear.